Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcast, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. WBUR Climate and Environment Correspondent Barbara Moran.
Hello, hello.
Hey.
You know what? Nobody welcomes me like you do, Daryl. Like, nobody is so happy to see me as you are. And so that's great. Thank you.
Oh, man. Barb, listen, when I see you in the hallways, I'm pumped.
Woo!
We got some very serious news we need to talk about here.
We do, but serious, but also positive, not just negative.
Well, I can't wait to hear you spin this one. Because I need to know, in a recent piece, you talked about an insect apocalypse.
Yeah.
Now, that's like all the insects or just roaches? Because if it's just roaches, I think I'm okay with that.
Right. I'd be okay with that too. And other horrible, icky things. No, all the insects, including the good insects, which is the trouble. Right. So people have been talking about an insect apocalypse for a couple of years. And this started a few years ago. You might remember when, like, people started saying, you know what, are there just less bugs around? Like, are there less bugs smashed on our windshields than there used to be when we were kids? And so scientists started looking at this and actually counting bugs and found that a lot of them are disappearing. And it sort of depends on where you are. And in a lot of the world, like, the total amount of bugs is disappearing like 1% to 2% a year. In some places, it's way worse, like 10%.
That's a lot.
It's a ton. I mean, like, literally tons of bugs. A lot of bugs are really, beneficial for various reasons. And the ones that we're most concerned about, we're talking about today, are pollinators, which are bugs that pollinate plants.
What kind of bugs are we talking?
So we're talking mostly bees, are what you talk about, are the most famous pollinators, but lots of other things pollinate plants. Butterflies, moths, some beetles, some flies.
Cool bugs, all cool bugs.
Yeah, bugs that we like.
Yeah.
Bugs that we like, right. We do not want them to be disappearing, right?
No.
So a lot of people are trying to do various things to help pollinators. So that's what I've been writing about.
With these pollinators, why are they so important? What is it about pollinators that make them so vital to our day-to-day lives and long-term?
Right. Okay. So this is super interesting. All right. So 35% of the food that we eat is pollinated food.
35%?
Yeah. So we wouldn't have the food without pollinators pollinating the plant. So, and then even a subset of that, which is super interesting, I found out, is that certain bees only pollinate certain plants, and certain plants can only be pollinated by certain bees, right? So if those bees go away, then those plants will go away. So one example of this is so interesting. This is the most interesting thing I've learned in ages. Okay. So some plants, including blueberries and cranberries, which are local plants, they're buzz pollinated. Okay. So that means that in order to be pollinated, a certain type of bee has to go land on the flower and has to shake its wings at a certain frequency.
I wish we were filming this because you were shaking.
I'm shaking my bee wings, and it has to shake at this exact frequency, and it shakes the pollen out, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing. These local bees evolved with local plants to sort of do these very certain things. And there's like almost 400 different types of bees in Massachusetts, which is amazing.
400 in Massachusetts alone?
The stats on this story are just mind-blowing, right?
Unbelievable.
So that's why it's important to, like, for food, and it's important to have this diversity of different pollinators in order to keep all these different foods going.
I do have a question that I would love for you to explain to me.
I don't know if I can answer it, but I'll try.
Okay, pollinators. What they're doing is they are, cleaning the pollen from the plants? Is that it?
I can tell you the answer. It's a little gross.
Hit it.
So pollen is basically plant sperm.
Okay.
And so it comes out of the male plant parts, and the pollinators, insects pick it up, and they eat it. They like it because they eat it, and it's really high in protein.
Okay. Well, I guess we got to put a parental advisory on this episode now.
Yeah, who knew? And then they sort of pick it up accidentally, and they're flying around with it. And then hopefully they land on another flower, and it goes to the female plant parts. And that's how the plant is fertilized.
Ah, wow. Okay. With this insect apocalypse, we're messing with that system. We're messing with our food supply. So this is something that directly affects us. So
absolutely,
it's time to take action.
Yep.
What can we do to help the pollinators?
I have so many good tips. Okay, so the best news is that you can help, and people should help, and it's also very easy to help.
Okay.
So the first thing you should do is not use pesticides on your lawn or garden.
No pesticides.
Most pesticides are, neurotoxins that are specifically designed to kill insects, right?
Okay.
So I talked a lot to Uli Lorimer. He's the director of horticulture at the Native Plant Trust, and here's what he told me about pesticides.
One of the other main drivers of risk for pollinators is the broad use of pesticides. So pollinator gardens should definitely not have any pesticides used because, what's the point? You're killing the very things you're trying to attract.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of decline in pollinators and other insects worldwide is pesticides and also habitat loss.
Okay. Is it that like people protecting their lawns or trying to make these lawns that look pretty and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. See, that's what it loops back to is this like pretty lawn thing.
Yeah.
People
you
are
talked about growing the wild grass, the native grass and stuff like that. Okay.
That's one. So that's easy. Okay. Number 2 is similarly let your lawn be a little messier, right? If you mow every 3 weeks instead of every week, or you leave some leaves for the winter, that is a huge help to pollinating insects.
Where were you when I was a teenager, having to cut the grass and rake the leaves?
I spent so much of my childhood raking leaves, but yeah. So because if you just leave the grass a little long, there's a lot more habitat for insects, and then a lot of insects overwinter in leaves. They sort of almost hibernate in leaves. So if you just leave them, some around the base of trees and stuff, that gives them habitat.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Politics has never been stranger or more online, which is why the politics team at Wired is making a new show, Wired Politics Lab. It's all about how to navigate the endless stream of news and information and what to look out for. Each week on the show, we'll dig into far-right platforms, AI chatbots, influencer campaigns, and so much more. Wired Politics Lab launches Thursday, April 11th. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. All right, so that's lawn care, right? Lay off the pesticides, the mowing and the raking. But what if I want to add some things? What if I want to plant some stuff?
Right. Be proactive. Go next level. Right. Absolutely. So that's great. Good for you, Daryl. Glad to hear you want to, do something extra.
Get my green thumb going.
Exactly. So it's very easy to plant a couple of flowers that can help pollinators. The main rule of thumb here is to start small. Like, don't go nuts. You can start with just a couple of flowers. Try to get a couple flowers that bloom all year long. So ideally, you'd have something blooming in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, so that the pollinators have somewhere to go all year. Mm-hmm. All right. And then the other tip is if you're going to plant something, you shouldn't bother with those little packets of like wildflower seeds. Like if you go to like the grocery store and they're like, ooh, wildflower seeds in a packet. Yay.
Leave them there.
They don't work because first of all, like most of those seeds in the packet are not native to New England. And the seeds are not like really that fertile anyway. So most of them are not going to bloom here. Mm-hmm. And if they do bloom, they'll kind of bloom once and then die. And then that's that. So that's a waste. So buy seedlings, spend a little more upfront, plant those, and then that's a big help.
Okay, so step up your seed game.
Yeah, and you can even do it in a container. Like, you don't have to have a garden. If you have just a bucket, bees can fly like up to a couple miles.
Mm-hmm.
So if you and your neighbors have some, they can kind of hopscotch around the neighborhood.
Okay, what's the next one?
This is about changing your mindset a little bit. So this may take a little bit of personal work. So this is about attracting butterflies, right? So a lot of people say like, well, I want to have butterflies in my garden, but they don't want caterpillars in their garden. And here's the thing, though, is that butterflies come from caterpillars.
Yeah.
And so if you want butterflies, you need to sort of open your mind a little bit to allowing caterpillars in and allowing them to eat some of your leaves. They're feeding caterpillars, right?
Which will become butterflies.
And
who doesn't love a caterpillar?
A lot of people. So, okay, so this is the funny thing. So I interviewed this woman, Martha Gatch, okay, and she is a regional education manager for Mass Audubon. And she does a lot of education about pollinator garden. And this is one of the main things people ask her. They're like, oh, I want to grow a garden and help pollinators, but how do I get rid of all these caterpillars? Here's what she says about this.
If you want butterflies, you have to grow caterpillars because butterflies are all about making the next generation. And so they need the right plant to lay their eggs on.
Yeah, let the caterpillars caterpill. You know what I'm saying? Let them do their thing.
That is so true. Yes, right. I need a bumper sticker that says, let the caterpillars caterpill.
Let them caterpill, And so a big takeaway from all of this is we need to rethink our spaces, like our lawns and even how we think about certain insects, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think about their lawns as sort of this work of art that needs to be this sort of perfect, flawless thing. And I think maybe people should open their minds a little bit and rethink it and think about it as a relationship between you and your space, right? And maybe it's you and the outdoors, and it could be a little give and take, right? Like you can contribute something. You can contribute.
Be a steward of the earth.
Oh, nice. I like that. That's good stuff you got there, man.
You know what I mean? Well, Barb, I have another question. Okay, so because we're talking about lawns, right? And I'm coming to you from my closet in my apartment. I don't have a lawn. For the folks who are renters like myself, what tips do you have for us?
Yeah, so you can help if you have a pot, do a container garden. It's just like one plant on the deck or a ledge or whatever you have.
Okay.
So one plant on a deck or one plant on your front stoop can totally do something.
It takes a community to save the pollinators, for sure. And so, Barb, you just gave us a few tips. Where can people find the rest?
So I put together a whole amazing tip sheet for our audience. It's online at WBUR.org, and it's got all kinds of tips and links for everybody to make it really easy. And I also did a whole episode about pollinator gardens for my food and climate newsletter, Cooked. And you can subscribe to that at WBUR.org/cooked.
And we will be sure to link to that in the show notes. Oh, man, Barb, let me tell you something. As always, it is a pleasure. We can talk about anything. You got us talking about radioactivity. You got us talking about an insect apocalypse, and it's a pleasure. What is this magic you have?
I don't know. I've got that busy bee magic.
It's just shaking with the... I love it. Oh, man. I will definitely be paying more attention to the flowers and the pollinators, and showing some extra love to the caterpillars out there because they need it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daryl. So much fun to talk to you, as always.
That's WBUR Climate and Environment Correspondent Barbara Moran. And if you want to learn more about pollinators and how you can support them and all kinds of issues related to climate and food, you can subscribe to Barb's newsletter. It's called Cooked, and you can find it at WBUR.org/cooked. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. What are you going to do to save the pollinators? Tell us hit us up on Instagram at WBUR The Common, or send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.